Well, it looks like we're back. That's right. I'm not going to go into it, but thankfully, I'm live again, and we can do live streams. We can get together. It's our time to talk about gang stalking, and my favorite topic is, well, there's so many things to talk about when it comes to gang stalking, but gaslighting is definitely one of my favorites because you cannot have gang stalking without it. Okay, and there's so many aspects of of gaslighting that go into gang stalking. I'm gonna have to clear my throat a little bit. Sorry. I did gargle before I did it, so I'm trying to avoid that. Soda used to work pretty good, but I quit drinking soda, and all that sugar is really, really, really bad for you. You get addicted to that stuff. But anyway, getting back to the point, understanding how many different aspects of gaslighting are used and gang stalking is very important. Okay. Because, all the way from the beginning of this ordeal that you're dealing with to the final state, which, can be, several different things. So, a lot of people talk about what's the end game of this anyway? Well, it depends, right? But there's going to be gaslighting throughout the whole thing. Okay. So whether they are trying to get you to internalize or reform you or experiment on you, get you to internalize the disinformation or the framework that they have, put against your psychological makeup. And in other words, when they get in there and they start doing this stuff to people, and the spiritual entities that are controlling them, when they start, doing their magic, they are reforming you. And I've talked about the fact that, when you deal with this as trauma, as you were subjected to gang stalking, you are literally processing information differently. They are invading your psyche, they are invading your life, they are invading your space, and they are, they're tweaking how you see things, how you interact with people. They are completely flipping your life upside down. They are turning your life into a medium of manipulation. Okay. Because that's what happens when people are subjected to this kind of control. Okay. Targets are harassed, they're stalked, they're surveilled, their houses are broken into, their apartments, whatever. Their personal property is messed with. They're getting into your vehicles. They're hacking your phone. They're harassing you at work. They're doing all these things. It's a complete 100% invasion of your life. And the way you process information is going to change, right? And I've talked about that before, that even when you see someone reading into this stuff, that if you watch like a gang stalking video and you see someone that is experiencing the propositional tyranny that we've talked about, right? When someone is subjected to this, it alters the way they see the world. They're looking for it. They may start reading into these things. They may buy into some of the disinformation that's out there, right? Sorry. And, rather than, understanding how their mind has been invaded, they will just start to assume a lot of things, right? When I've talked about the accident scene thing, right? Where targets are like, no, they're setting this stuff up for me. Like, how much money are they spending on me? My gosh, they had the fire trucks and they didn't set that up for you, man. Okay. And I've talked about the perps. They're everywhere, right? And, that's what happens to the target. Then they move, through their landscape. They move into that scenario after probably being demonically attacked and set up for this whole thing, right? Because I've talked about the time dilation, or whatever, however you want to process that. They're, that they can see things, they can set things up in advance. And then what? Well, the target is going to assume that the whole thing was set up for them, right? And, there might be people there that are influenced or whatever, because the people are everywhere. It's like the whole proposition that a targeted individual is being chased around and all these people are following you across the country, across the world. There is surveillance and stuff like that. I've talked about there's a lot of different ways this can work, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? The framework, the mechanism, all of that stuff is already there. Okay, so the target moves through that landscape. They come upon the accident scene. They're getting harassed. They might have gotten some comments, and then the first responders are looking at them funny or laughing or pointing, and well, they may even throw some street theater or a direct a conversation at them as they go by. Their windows down, and yeah, it's all for you or whatever. Okay, well, hypothetically assume that they get that kind of attention, and the proposition is sealed in their mind. And what is that? Because remember, we're talking about propositional tyranny. We're talking about gaslighting. The propositional tyranny is that they're in the Truman Show, and that all these things, whether it's the red car, the blue car, the white car, all the color combinations of the cars, everybody in the whole city is basically choreographed along with the first responders in this whole scheme just to mess with them. My gosh, they've got to be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, they set the whole thing, or they didn't. Okay, it's already set up. It's already there. The framework of this gaslighting, of the delusion of grandeur, which they use to get the target to believe they're crazy. Because like I said, excuse me, hold on. Like I said, it's not that the target is wrong about everything, right? They're just wrong about how the specifics are working, about how the logistics are playing out. Okay. Yeah, they're a victim of harassment. People are messing with them. Absolutely. But they do not understand how. Okay. And so every aspect of that whole thing involves the gaslighting. Okay. And then like I said, when you move into the deeper levels of this whole thing, that's when you get into the reforming. Okay. The propositions, all that stuff comes first. Then you get into the emotional stuff, right? And I've talked about the invisible perps, and I've talked about there's a lot of ways this can work. And the targets that experience the higher forms of harassment, they are dealing with an amalgamation of all these things, right? An amalgamation of the government stuff. Okay, maybe there's a few cops in their city that have got their eye on them, and maybe they're working to turn some of the other cops against them. Maybe there's some people down at the workplace, right? And they're just demonically influenced, but they're starting trouble, right? They're gaining ground on that. That no matter where the target goes, they get harassed. They go to the convenience store, right? Somebody's there, and then they're dealing with somebody who's literally following them around, and it could be somebody who is literally getting paid to do that, along with individuals that are breaking into their house or whatever, and they could be dealing with the whole thing. So it's not one or the other. Okay, a lot of people, because they get frustrated. You got to understand how to put these things together logistically. If you don't, you're gonna look crazy. Okay, getting back to the point. What is the basic framework of discrediting the targeted individual? Propositional tyranny, right? Oh my gosh, I'm on the Truman Show. Everybody knows my business, right? They're all reading my mind, and they're setting up accident scenes for me, and all these people are out in traffic, and it's all because of me, and I'm special. They're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on me, and it's now, before I go any further with that, is that individual being harassed? Oh, you bet. Absolutely. They're getting messed with on every level. But is there, that much money being thrown at them? No. It doesn't have to work that way, right? What's the delusion? What are the people going to think when they finally, call out that individual and get them to start telling everybody what's happening? Oh, you got to believe me. right? They're all it's all happening that way, right? And they've got the video, and they're, oh, look, these people they're all color coded in vehicles just for me, and look, it's the accident scene. It was set up just for me. And what are they going to think? This person is nuts. This person has lost their marbles, man. You're losing it. What do you mean they're spending all this money and setting all this stuff up? Are you? How narcissistic are you? Right. So there's the beginning of it. Right. Now, is it true that they're being harassed? Absolutely. But they're just wrong about how it's working. And now they've been discredited, and they look like they have a delusion of grandeur. They look as though they are suffering from a psychosis and a persecutory delusion, and they are being harassed. They are. Okay. It's important to see how this works. Then you move into the emotional stuff. Like I said, the invisible perp, and it's like that feeling of significance or whatever that I talked about, that the target might feel as they're moving up linearly to those different situations where they can be manipulated or whatever. Like when they think that the first responders are all just waiting for them or whatever. Now, a lot of those things can happen and set the target up, or you could even move into different scenarios involving what I've talked about concerning the crescendo effect, which is very popular when you get into the demonic, or even things that involve technology. Okay. Is that, it's invisible. It's there. It might be a frequency that is affecting the target and how they feel. They may feel anxious. Their heart might start beating faster. They might start feeling depressed or weak or whatever it is. It's going to affect, basically how they're processing information, and it's going to affect them emotionally. And I've talked about, how even when you get into the false doctrines and stuff like that are involved in different doctrines of demons, okay? And how do those people become convinced of those things, right? It's like when individuals say, well, I don't know, I just feel like I don't know, maybe I'm losing my salvation, or God's condemning me or whatever. Well, that's based on a feeling, okay? It's not based on what the Word of God says, right? That we should come boldly before the throne of grace and so on and so forth. That God is not willing that any should perish, but he desires all to come to the knowledge of the truth, repentance, and so on and so forth, right? That all gifts come down from the Father of lights, and so on and so forth, and that he's gracious and all these other things. But then what? Then you have this environmental tyranny that begins, and the individual starts to feel far away from God, or they start to feel anxious, or they start getting attacked demonically, right? And a lot of times you'll have this amalgamated in with different doctrines, to where if you use the flip side of that type of tyranny, which would be the honey and the vinegar, I've talked about that before, that would be negative stimuli, right? You think God is mad at you or something like that. Oh, I don't know what's happening, and it's mixed in with something that makes the individual believe that God is judging them or whatever. What do you have? The flip side of that, in order to solidify the delusion, is that when they get into these doctrines of demons, whether it be some ridiculous determinist doctrine, or some cognitive dissonant monergism that has to appeal to mystery, or some God, we don't know what God wants, we don't know what he's going to do, he's mysterious, he might just turn you into a vessel of wrath, or maybe he's gonna do something good, we don't know. And then you're very vulnerable to what? The tyranny, the emotional manipulation that goes along with it. But first, the individual might feel a great sense of peace when they walk into that, whatever you want to call it, pseudo-Christian cult or whatever. They get in there and the teacher starts to talk, and they feel so peaceful. They feel a sense of ecstasy. And, as the individual, pours out this supposed biblical doctrine, which it's in this case, it's false, they start to kind of get those different types of stimuli, which solidify that whole thing. But then when it flips, right, because once you accept these whole concepts involving the appeal to mystery or God doing certain things or whatever, then, like I said, it makes them vulnerable to the tyranny. So they've already accepted the idea that, well, we don't know. Maybe God's going to turn you into a vessel of wrath, or maybe he'll have mercy on you. We don't. God can do anything he wants because he's sovereign. And so, now you're faced with the dilemma of trying to figure out whether you're one of the elect or the chosen or something. Like I said, I push back against that in the target individual community, because what happens is you're taking that word out of context, right? And you're applying it to something that has nothing to do with the biblical meaning, which means that you're chosen in Christ in the sense that you're in him by faith. That's your chosenness. It's not that God is just choosing people. Okay? Because why? Because now you are susceptible to the tyranny. So now you have the dilemma. Am I one of the chosen? Am I one of the elect? Am I one of the special people that won the heavenly lottery? Right? You don't know. And so, what? I don't know what's happening. I don't know. I feel horrible. Oh, maybe you're just one of those people that got drawn in, but God really, he doesn't ever plan to do that effectual calling with you. And so now, maybe you're a vessel of wrath. We don't know. Well, I don't have to worry about that. And of course, the guru and that false doctrine and those individuals, they're going to have their poster child, and they're going to be getting blessed. And they're going to, supposedly get the healing, and they're going to have all these wonderful things. Well, we don't know what's wrong with you, right? But so they are being manipulated by the tyranny of the circumstances. In other words, since targets are no different. Okay, it's like that in the world for you as a targeted individual, because you're dealing with all this negative stuff, right? You are dealing with the tyranny of gangstalking, the tyranny of the circumstances, and who knows why. Because remember, all of this disinformation is coming at the target. And a lot of times you might have something in your past, or maybe it has nothing to do with that. Maybe it's just some, supposed rumor that has been started about the targeted individual, but it still involves that type of emotional manipulation. Because why? Because now people are looking at you funny, right? I wonder if they believe it. Do they believe that I'm the deviant, that I'm the drug dealer, that whatever they told them, and it's got to be bad because, the target is getting all this negative attention, right? Whatever. And the tyranny is the destroyer in that sense. And I've talked about this before, that you can turn that against the attackers and against the kingdom of darkness, in the sense that anytime because the tyranny is the destroyer in two different ways. First of all, it is there to destroy the target and to manipulate them. Okay, and they will use that type of tyranny to break you down, to get you to believe things that are not true. They will use it in the gaslighting platform. They will use it to deprive the targeted individual and get them into a place where they can be manipulated and use that tyrannical pressure to get them to believe not only that God is either inconsistent, or he is judging them, or whatever, he's allowing this, however that works, because everybody's got weaknesses, and that whole thing is going to be there for people who are believers. The other thing is that the community, or all these people, have the right to do it, right? Otherwise they wouldn't be getting away with it. Look at all the people involved, right? You're the freak. You're the odd person out. You're not worthy to be part of the group. And that scapegoating is another platform, right? While we're talking about that, as the individual moves into that type of tyranny, what else is possible? Well, now there's all kinds of different psychological reactions that can happen. As I said before, what are they going to do? They're going to use this to form you. They want to anyway. What happens to people who've been shunned and put in that place of a scapegoat? What happens to their psyche? You can actually become basically numbed to physical pain simply by being rejected by people socially. It will affect your psyche in a lot of different ways. And they've shown that in different studies that it will affect how you see yourself. It will affect how you react to other people emotionally. And it's just a way to get you to internalize this whole thing. In other words, we'll use the flip side of it. Okay. What about the individual who becomes self-sacrificing, right? The philanthropist or the hero or the guru, right? Well, they see themselves differently, but guess what? They were never excommunicated. They were never put in the place of a scapegoat. They were never put in that place of persecution, right? They were never the odd person out. And as a result, they see themselves differently. They get a different reaction. They are kind of feeding on the social structure differently, right? And that has formed not only their psyche, but how they see themselves. And, I've talked about this before, and the Stanford experiment is a good example, is that people are role playing. Okay. You're the prisoner. I'm the prison guard. What happened? It was bad, right? And everybody was we're all just people, right? But the way we perceive ourselves according to the geometrical structures and our physical, appearance and stuff like that, to how people treat us, to the tyranny that we are exposed to, and the different roles that we are put in by these tyrannical spiritual beings that have decided the pecking order and manipulation out there. And I've talked about this too, that, and I've called it the correlation effect. And a lot of people underestimate the power of manipulation. I've talked about the fact that when targets deal with this, maybe their family members, which is a strategic plan to create that surreal emotional manipulation. It's one thing to be attacked by a stranger. It's another thing to all of a sudden go from love to hate with someone that you've spent, your whole life around. Right, all those associations, all the things, the Christmas, the birthdays, whatever, Thanksgiving dinner, all that stuff is amalgamated. All those triggers are amalgamated in, and now you have a connection to gang stalking. Now you have that amalgamated framework of triggers, and not only that, you have that surreal manipulation framework, right? Whereas you have the honeymoon experience with your sweetheart or whatever, and a lot of people will experience this when they're dating or when they get married, and they're just in love and everything is just sweet, and then they have their first fight. Boy, it's a horrible feeling, isn't it? And the demonic entities love that kind of stuff. They feed on it. Okay, but what does it do? It's a very uncomfortable feeling. You're crossing over to the complete opposite spectrum of your emotional framework. Okay, and it's not a good feeling. So when moving into that whole scenario, what happens when targets deal with that disinformation, that type of emotional manipulation in that framework? Oh, I wonder if they believe the lie. I wonder if they believe all these people, and they have gotten all of their energy in the sense and all of their reassurance. They've created this social structure. It's like their whole world is torn apart. Their family is looking at them funny. All of a sudden, people are not getting a hold of them. They're being treated differently by friends, family, and everyone. Okay, it devastates people. And I've talked about this before. You have to realize how easily people are manipulated. You have to consider the source of your attackers, and you also have to consider the frailty of the people around you. Okay, so the correlation effect, and I've talked about that before. That we'll say, you have hypothetical demonic entities, right? Some people process it as technology, but I've talked about that. They have technology, okay? Whatever, however you want to look at it. But the target comes into their vicinity. Now they could start making people feel uneasy, right? And as I mentioned, the psychological gaslighting framework We'll use the example of the religious spirits and stuff like that I talked about earlier. The individual, in other words, they feel very peaceful and pleasant and so on and so forth around that individual. And of course, they start to trust the false teacher. They start to have faith in that framework or false doctrine, and they don't see the danger of those things that they are letting into their mind. And then the tyranny comes, the circumstances. Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's all going bad now. Well, that's the setup, right? That's always the setup, right? That's always the way it is. But it's another example. You've probably heard people say this. Well, I don't know. When it comes to that, I always go with my gut, because it's and the demons will do that stuff too, right? They're you're dealing with something that's invisible, okay, and it's very effective in manipulating people. So you have that scenario, we'll just say, and you don't know what's going on. You feel nervous, and you get these thoughts in your mind. Well, I've got to go right instead of left, and it works out. And you go, "Ooh, boy, if I would have gone left, it would have been bad." Go with your gut. Go with your gut. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's some kind of psychic out of it. Maybe I got a gift. I don't know about you. Go with your gut. Well, that's trickery, because what's going to happen when it comes time for the crucial moment of you to figure something out, rather than processing the information critically, looking at it, whether it's true or false, as in the case of the false doctrine or whatever, what are you going to do? Well, I don't know. I'm just going to go with my gut. I'm going to go with that feeling. And you're already being manipulated. You have already been hijacked. And now, rather than to process information correctly, rather than using the Word of God as the foundation, what are you going to do? You're going to listen. I don't know. I'm going to go with my gut. I'm going to go with that teacher, that person, that feeling that makes me feel good. It's got to be right, because it's always been right before. It was a setup. It's always a setup. Emotional manipulation is always a setup. Okay? Really, really, really bad things can feel good for a while. It's always like that. Okay? But in the case of the correlation effect concerning the targeted individual, that framework is already there in most people's life. That's one of the foundations that these things use to set up people, to manipulate people, whether it's in the false doctrines or whether it's just their life philosophy or whatever. So all of a sudden the target comes within their geographical location. Well, they start feeling weird. They're going to start correlating that with the individual. Okay. And this could be done with family members. It could be done with strangers. It could be done with anybody. Okay. And then, you could even, because I've talked about this before, a lot of people will say it's, V2K or some kind of computer or whatever. But like I said, the technology comes from them. And a lot of times people will have intrusive thoughts, or they'll have things popping into their mind. Well, I don't know, that person's, this or that. Well, I don't know, something's going on with that person. That person's evil or whatever. Or people get weird, philosophies in their mind, and their animals might react to someone, or they'll all these things get put into their framework. Animals just know. They know a good person. They know, but they don't know. And they're also susceptible to that kind of thing. And it all mingles together into the place where now we have psychic animals, not to downplay animals. I love animals. Now we have psychic animals, and now we have gut feelings and all kinds of mysterious forces out there that are telling us what to do, despite what we rationally see with our eyes and process with our brains. You see what I'm getting at? It's gaslighting. It's manipulation. And it's done not only with technology, but it's done demonically. Okay? And what happens? People start moving into that propositional tyranny. Right? Just like the guy or gal who starts thinking the accident scenes are set up for them, or their whole city is a Truman Show. It's not working that way. Seems like it, but it's not working that way, right? Well, I don't know. I got to go with Mike. No, you don't. Well, I don't know. God seems a million miles away. He's not. Well, I don't know. The God's not being my friend. It's not him. It's a demon. Okay? And all these things work the same way. They all do. And it's gaslighting. It's a framework that is used to manipulate you. Okay. You have to see it. And as I said earlier, you have to use the tyranny as the destroyer, because that's what they're using to manipulate you. They're using tyranny, emotional tyranny. They're suffocating you. They are doing all kinds of things to targets, the deprivation, the attacks, the trauma invasion. It's all demonic mind control. And I've talked about that before. Whether you're looking at a government thing or however you amalgamate it together, it's pretty much the same. And the tyranny, like I said, is going to be the destroyer in two ways. So the thing you have to remember, and I've talked about this before because people get caught up in all the disinformation out there, that at the root, you're dealing with a spiritual scenario in the sense that your intrinsic value is that you were made in the image of God. You're going to be processed. You're either going to go to heaven or hell. Sorry if you don't believe that, but you're going to find out I'm right. So ultimately, you're a commodity in that sense. And I've talked about it, because for the spiritual realm, I don't know exactly how they or what they get out of it, but they get something out of it. Okay. The Bible's very clear that the devil roams around devouring who he can devour, and it's basically the same in the sense that he is the ruler of the kingdom of darkness, and that's really what they're out to do. They cannot beat God. Okay, they're not that dumb, and I've talked about the contradictions involved in that before. If they could try to put him in a bad light or something, or hurt God or so, I'm sure they would try and do that. But the point is that they are after you. They want to devour you. They want to condemn you. They want to deceive and manipulate you. Okay. As far as the government or something like that, well, who knows? I mean, they might be experimenting on you. They might be doing a lot of things. Okay. You might be getting used as that little vessel of wrath to scare people into conformity. Well, you want to end up like that crazy target? You better keep your mouth shut, right? Or it could be there to solidify the delusion in people's minds. Not only that going against the group is a bad idea, but becoming a Christian is a bad idea. If you're really going to stand up for what is true, you're not going to, conform to, the status of all these unbiblical doctrines and stuff out there. If you dare to stand up, well, I don't know. Look what happened to Bill. Well, I don't know, man. It just doesn't seem like it works. Right. And then you have the other type of framework out there where people who are rebellious, right? The prosperity of the wicked in Psalm 73, it seems like they're fine, right? They don't, that if you read that Psalm, you'll see what I'm talking about. They don't have any afflictions. They seem to have a lot of money. They don't have any trouble. Their kids are healthy. They live to be old, and they don't seem to have any trouble in life. It just can't be true. God's either inconsistent or maybe he doesn't even exist, right? That's the lie. That's the gaslighting framework. That's the delusion that comes out of the tyranny. And getting back to that tyranny, you have to use the tyranny that you have against them, because it actually is self-refuting. Right? I've talked about that. It's like when people start getting angry with you or, accusing you of being crazy, right? You need to, you just you're crazy. Why don't you go get help or whatever? Well, if you were, obviously, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't be able to understand that you were crazy because it would be out of your control. So them being angry with you is pretty contradictory, right? Like the certain individuals out there that persecute the targeted individual community, right? Supposedly you're mentally ill and suffering from delusions and everything else, but they're going to torture you and be hostile and caustic and everything. The whole thing is just obviously a bunch of BS, right? But as you move in to the tyranny of your experience as a targeted individual, what's going to happen inevitably? I've talked about that. You're going to be dealing with dysfunction, paranoia, confusion, social isolation, financial destitution. You're going to be dealing with dysfunction. Okay. And you're also going to be dealing with the tyranny of the injustice. Okay. It's going to be very frustrating. You're going to be judged, and you people aren't going to know what you're dealing with. They're not going to understand all the things that that are putting pressure on you. You're going to be weighed in the balance of this competitive world that we exist in, and it's just not going to be fair. It's going to be frustrating for you, and the fact that you're isolated and all that other stuff is just it's going to just add to it, right? But not only that, um, the whole idea of you moving into solving these problems, which I've talked about that before. A lot of these things are out of your control. Okay, so you're going to be gaslighted in that area that you got to fix it, right? And if you don't, just go stand up to these people. You're a coward or whatever, or that you don't show your face and tell everybody you're a target individual, you're a coward, or you're not a real target, or you'll get into all that kind of manipulation in the target individual. Well, I don't see, that person doesn't show their face. They're a gang stalker, they or whatever. Okay, don't be stupid. All right, don't play into the manipulation. But the tyranny that is going against you also cancels out some of the culpability that you would have in that dysfunction. Right? As I said, these people don't know what you're dealing with. Right? Yeah, you're paranoid. And you're going to be tempted to tell people, well, you just don't understand what I'm dealing with. You don't, it doesn't matter. Forget that. You're just being manipulated at that level. And I've talked about this before. You have to have faith and know that eventually these things are going to come out. Right now, you might look crazy. Right now, you might look like a loser. Right now, you might look like you need meds or whatever, or you just look lazy, or they're believing the lies about you and your family's believing it, or everybody's, but they're going to eventually find out. Okay. And also, the people that are doing this are eventually going to get their asses handed to them. It's going to happen. If they don't repent, right, there's only one thing that's going to happen, and it's it's not going to be good. So, that manipulation is going to be canceled out. Also, like I said, the fact that you're dealing with all this stuff, we'll just say you did screw up. We'll say you did. And I guess I'm not going to use that example, but we'll use the example of someone blowing up or whatever, getting angry, or losing their cool or whatever. It's like the technique that narcissists will use to discredit their victims and basically destroy someone's character. They will gaslight them behind the scenes. They will chip away at their sanity. And then they'll provoke them around a bunch of people that they have prepped and gotten them ready to believe the lie. Oh, I don't know about old Fred. He sure has been acting weird lately. I don't know what's up with him. And then they'll provoke the individual after chipping away at their sanity for years or months, and they'll freak out and, oh, what's wrong with you? Oh my gosh, boy. Boy, you better get some meds or something. I don't know, but whoa, but nobody else knows. Nobody else knows what's been happening behind the scenes. Nobody has the idea, right? So, at that point, the culpability is gone. So even if you do make a mistake, even if you're having trouble or reading into things, the tyranny is going to cancel a lot of that out, because it's pretty much a natural reaction for what you're dealing with as a targeted individual. Like I said, if you're paranoid and people are harassing you and messing with you, breaking, it's a big deal, right? That's just a natural reaction to what you're dealing with. But they're going to try and get you to internalize that. And they're going to try and get you into that place where you get emotional with that stuff. And then they're going to try and provoke you into a place where they can accuse you more if you react, or you start buying into this whole thing, internalizing it, or you just become emotional. And like I said, the framework and the medium of you just as a clay vessel, well, they can do things to you psychologically that make you vulnerable to those dispositions. And not only will you start role playing, but you will literally see yourself that way. So it's like the person who becomes rejected, socially, or they'll be the scapegoat. And now it's like they're just, I mean, it affects them psychologically to the point where they don't feel pain anymore. They don't seem to care. Their emotions have been suppressed, right? They don't have compassion. You want to create a serial killer or some kind of sadist or something? You do that to them. You get them into the place of a scapegoat. You get people to persecute them. You get them to deal with sexual deprivation and all kinds of things. And the next thing you know, you've got a freak. Why? Because they've been manipulated. They've been set up and they've been put into that medium, that framework of gaslighting and psychological manipulation. Now I'm going to see who's out there. Hold on a minute. I got to get my little trusty magnifying glass to see who's out there. Okay, let's see what. Oops. Okay, well, Bonter2224, welcome to the live stream. Chris Steger, hey, welcome. Yeah, I'm glad to be back, Chris, and glad to see you. Hopefully everything's working out for you. I think your last message is that you were dealing with some pretty heavy stuff. Hopefully that comes back to normal. I know it's easy to romanticize the addiction thing, and that can be a problem. And not only that, but the deprivation that targets deal with, sometimes it's very subtle, and it's easy to try to, well, I don't know if it's easy. Targets are more vulnerable to regulating themselves and trying to find pleasure in something like an addiction, because there's a lot of other stuff in your life that's just not right. And that makes targets vulnerable. It's a real heavy gaslighting medium when you get a target dealing with deprivation and so on and so forth. And then, what do they name? Well, I'm going to have a beer, or I'm going to go mess around with a substance or whatever. And they're desperate. They want to feel good. They want to feel pleasure. But, the regular avenues that they would normally use to regulate their brain and get the dopamine and all that stuff going to where you could have, a natural rush or a natural positive, I don't know, reinforcement and stimuli from your environment is just not there. And so they'll love, I've talked about that. When you deal with this whole idea of gaslighting, when someone has got an addiction, they'll use that. Right, they'll use it as manufactured justification to stalk and harass somebody, and to just drive them nuts. Because what happens to a guy or a girl that has an addiction, and that becomes the axiom of the excuse to harass them. Well, you got yourself a vicious cycle now, man. Because what's going to happen? They're going to harass you. They're going to deprive you. They're going to yank your chain. So in order to feel better, the chances of you going back to booze or whatever it is, pretty high. And then when you do that, then what? It's just going to get worse. And then you don't do that again. And then they're going to come in and deprive you and yank your chain, and you're going to go do it again. Oh, you're just not learning. We're going to do it some more. And it's always going to be your fault. And it's a futile scenario. And if they can get you into that little pinball game, they will bang you around, and it sucks. But hopefully things are better for you, Chris. And let's see who else is out there. Gabriel, welcome to the live stream. Okay. Yeah, it looks like Chris said they had them really going after me. And regards to persecution. Oh, it looks like your comment must have got cut off there, Chris. Sorry about that. Oh, okay. So it looks like they were getting spiritual with you in that. I don't know. Chris said, regards to persecution, end times persecution, really saying all sorts of evil things about God and Jesus. Now, I'm assuming you're talking about the people that were surrounding you. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, Chris. But yeah, that's an interesting aspect of the tyranny of these people. Whereas they can go one way or the other. They'll either try to get you to believe that somehow you failed and they're righteous, or they'll just come out of they'll come out of the darkness and just be, blasphemous about God and everything. And then the surreal aspect of that is that, he's not striking them down with a lightning bolt or whatever. And it seems like they're, getting away with it, and they'll live that way for decades. And the whole temptation is to believe that, they have the right to do this to you, and that somehow you really messed up, or that, the devil is winning, or whatever kind of delusion they want to send you. That's the lateral comparison gaslighting, and that's crazy. But I've seen that stuff, and as I said before, when you get into Psalm 73 and the prosperity of the wicked, that's just there to test people so that you will live by faith, because it looks like it. They're not dealing with gang stalking. You must be wrong. God is not, doing anything to them. Yeah, it's got to be right. It's like the false teacher, right? The obvious charlatan. And what's the medium of gaslighting there? Well, there they are. They've got this huge ministry. They've got a bunch of money. They look like a politician, and they're up there. And if God, was in disagreement with them, or they were really telling false stuff, he'd just hit them with a lightning bolt, right? But there they are. They've been up there for 20, 30, 40 years. It must be right, or, God must be on vacation, or it's all there to test you. That's all it is. Okay, let's see what else is out there. Moving. I'm just kind of sifting through these comments, and I'm not trying to miss anybody's comment here. Ernie, welcome to the live stream. Jason Black, welcome to the live stream. Spirite Love, welcome to the live stream. Catherine Jennifer, welcome. It looks like Jason got harassed here. Let's see what happened to him. Jason Black says, I got the full meal deal in Walmart yesterday. Getting in my way, and something about not being able to walk with people in car. Let me see. In cars, guy was in the cheese section waiting, asking if he was, yeah, okay, so you were getting the professional object treatment, right, where people just all of a sudden can't figure out not to walk straight at you. Oh, I'm sorry. Was I standing in your way? Oh, silly me. You get some of these people are ridiculous. And it's not like they're all just, chasing you over there. They're just everywhere, man. And I've seen that stuff. Or you get you go into the restaurant or whatever it is, and people will just be sitting around, and it's like you're standing there. You're like, really? Are you guys working here? Are you employees? Oh, silly me. Oh, I forgot I was at work. Something I could do for you? Did you want me to, it's like, no, I just came in here to hang out with myself. It's, some people, they'll just play dumb, but you got to love that one. The professional object, people do that very well. It's like, when you get in that real awkward scenario, I've learned to just kind of hold still, because if you try to move left, they'll go left. If you try to move right, they'll go right. And it's just ridiculous at that point. You almost got to throw it back on them a little bit, make them feel stupid. And whatever you do, don't get mad. It's like when you get to the door, and so you got the guy it's like he's holding the door, but he's standing in front of you. It's like, dude, if you're gonna hold the door for me, you're gonna have to at least get out of the way. Okay, well, I don't know where you went to school, but you got to work on that one. Sorry about that, Jason. It can happen to targets. On average, Joe is in the live stream. Welcome. Let's see here. Joe says, if I'm already being gang stalked, could it hurt to blow the whistle on some work issues? Well, I don't know. You have to try to figure out what you stand to gain with it on average, Joe. Since the framework is everywhere, you're taking a pretty big chance. The problem that you're going to run into as a targeted individual, and I've talked about this, even if a guy has evidence, is that you don't really know what you're getting yourself into, because the bait is a situation where you don't think you can lose. Oh, I got evidence, or you got something, and you don't think you can lose, and then you find out that everybody already knows anyway, and then they laugh at you, or they obfuscate the whole thing, and now they use it as an axiom to persecute you, right? And then you get you accused of being a troublemaker, or being some kind of weird, narcissist with a persecutory delusion or whatever. But you got baited into it. So could it hurt? Yeah, I think it could. You got to try to figure out what you stand to gain, dude. I mean, are you going to be able to really do anything for you? Because if it's not going to do anything for you, I wouldn't do it. And that's really the bottom line. It's anytime anytime you're dealing with the reality of I don't know, this tyranny of gang stalking, like I said, you don't know who's in on it, and you don't know who just doesn't know. That's always the biggest issue when you want to blow the whistle or confront someone or you don't know, because there are people, and I've run into them before, where you never would have thought they were involved in this stuff or knew about it or anything, and they did. And I knew one guy, I knew him, I worked with him off and on for decades, man. I met him back in like 1992, and he didn't come out of the box until 2018, man. Literally. And he got evil. I mean, I noticed some stuff I really didn't understand. I thought, well, I don't know, because you don't know. And then he just came out of it, and I was like, whoa, took the mask off, and I was like, gee, I never would have expected that guy. But it was always there. And the problem about trying to solve this whole ordeal of persecution and gang stalking. Hold on, I think I got something going on outside here. Oh, okay, that's just there's a spider web. I said, what the hell is that? That can look really intense when it's right up next to your camera. But when you're dealing with this whole issue of blowing the whistle or whatever, you don't know. There's people out, they don't know about any of this, and you're going to look nuts, right? And it's always your word against everybody else's. I'd be careful on that one, Joe. I would, man. And you got to remember where you are, and it's important to remember that right now we're dealing with the tyranny of Satan on the world, on the earth, and there's a whole lot of injustice out there. There's a whole lot of people that are involved, not specifically in gang stalking, but just in that framework. And whether it's an amalgamated philosophy that is in their mind, or whatever, or that group dynamic, to where they see somebody that starting to experience that persecution, they don't want to. They'll turn a blind eye to it. And what I'm getting at is you're kind of on your own sometimes, and sometimes the best thing to do is just put one foot in front of the other and do what you're supposed to do and pray to God and let him take care of it. And, because like I said, you could be getting called out, and you don't want to give him that kind of leeway. But I would evaluate it that way. What do you stand to gain? Do you really know who you're dealing with? And what could happen that I don't want to happen? Is it worth it? The pros and the cons, right? Because at the end of the day, you appeal to God, the highest power in all creation, for him to work it out. Because sometimes we just get in the way. Sometimes we just we want to do it a certain way, and it doesn't work out. But you'll have to figure that out. I don't know. It could go bad. Huh. So it looks like we got some more details on this. On average, Joe says my supervisor discriminated against me and his boss covered for him. He also said racist remarks, which I have on audio, and was told I'd be setting up the employer for a lawsuit for retaliation. Huh. Well, I mean, it just depends. I don't know what you do for a living. Uh, and if you stand to be able to win a lawsuit like that, I mean, because that's leeway right there. That would give you leverage, right? So what I'm getting at is this. So in a scenario where you have you have leverage. So if you're getting, we'll say Joe's getting harassed at work, and it sounds like it's getting pretty bad. They can get away with pretty much anything right now. But if you had the power to bring a lawsuit into that scenario, then anything that they would do after that, if you could get a lawyer to do that, and you could call one up and ask them about it, you don't have to tell anybody. You could just contact the lawyer. Cause you do a pro bono lawyer, right? If a pro bono lawyer won't take it, it means you don't have a case. Okay. But we'll just say hypothetically that you did. Well, they're screwed now, because if they try to fire you or do anything to you at work, you got another lawsuit, which is a retaliation lawsuit. And those are really easy to win. So you're not going to lose your job. If you got evidence, man, if you got leverage, like I said, talk to a lawyer. You're not going to hurt anything at that point, man. You're an untouchable at that point. If they even think about messing with you, it's double damage. And if I don't know, but like I said, you need to talk to a pro bono lawyer, because if you got a lawsuit, you've got leverage, and at that point, they aren't going to be able to fire you, man. Period. I did that, and the lawyer, because they started messing with me at work, and I talked to the boss, and I said, listen, I said, I don't know, the manager that you got working right now is either not listening to you or a complete idiot. And I told him what was happening, and he said, yeah, and if she ever does it again, she's going to get fired. And she didn't, she got corrected very quickly, because that's another lawsuit. Any type of retaliation is, that's a, especially the body cam and all that stuff that Joe has all the time, they're toast. So that might be different. But like I said, you got to talk to a pro bono lawyer and see what you got going on. You could stand to get some literal compensation. Not only that, you got leverage. That's a great example of the power of a body cam, and that's a good one, Joe. That's a good one. Yeah, well, it could be time for you to make a move, Joe. Like I said, really, it comes down to you getting a hold of a pro bono lawyer. He or she, whatever, they're going to know whether you got a case. If you got a case, it's on. It's on like Donkey Kong, and you got your job. They can't take it away. You're going to get compensated, and anything that comes after that's a retaliation lawsuit. The workplace harassment's over. It's done. They're screwed. So, like I said, talk to a lawyer. Yeah, on average, Joe says, thank you so much for the advice. You said the same thing as my union advocate. Yeah. Well, that's how it works. I mean, that's like I looked into the legal stuff. I've dealt with it. If you got leverage, you got leverage, man. And it's like what I was talking about before with these people who say that we got to get a lawsuit going or whatever. Don't ever believe that kind of thing. You're not going to petition a lawsuit. Lawyers know whether you have a case or not. That's what a pro bono lawyer. You never get a hold of a lawyer and just pay them a bunch of money to do something for you. If you got to do that, you're screwed. They're just going to take your money. You don't have a case. You always go to a pro bono lawyer, man. Always, always go to a pro bono lawyer because, like I said, so many times, if whatever the case is that these people always come up with, we're going to get a lawsuit going for a bunch of targets. If that's true, then there's going to be a lawyer, and it's going to be obvious and legitimate. They will, they'll climb over, basically, snow encapsulated mountains and swim through shark infested waters to get cash. Lawyers will. They don't care if they have to spend years in litigation as long as there's enough money involved. And when you're dealing with something like a class action scenario, that's huge money, man. Class action lawyers they're dangerous. You don't want a class action lawyer after you. So anytime these people talk about, getting a petition together and stuff, no, that isn't how it works. So, but anyway, just remember that. Oh, looks like my little kitty's having nightmares over here. What are you doing? Are you running from the puppies? Oh, my goodness. Oh, yeah, she's been sleeping next to me. She's getting real cuddly lately. Okay, let's see what else is out there. Yeah. Yeah, get a hold of the lawyer, Joe. That's where you need to go. They'll be able to tell you everything. Don't say anything to anybody else. Don't threaten anybody at work, man. Don't say a word to anyone at work. Period. Do not talk to anybody about it. Do not talk about it with anyone but the lawyer. Period. Okay. And Sons of Thunder says heavy gang stalking the last couple of months. Wow. Yeah. Well, man, I could feel you. Targeted individuals deal with that stuff. And I just throw a prayer out for everybody right now that they have a time of refreshment and peace, and that you would all remember that your hope is not necessarily in the end of your tyrannical circumstances, even though that could happen, but that God is going to work that out for your good, and He can do that. And also that you need to remember that eventually everybody's going to know what happened, because that's one of the most frustrating aspects of this whole thing is that it seems like everybody's getting away with it and nobody's going to ever know. They're all just going to look at you like you're nuts, and it's frustrating. It's going to happen. It's going to be brought out, guys. This stuff, it seems hidden now. It's just the tyranny of it. Ernie says social media kills people. Yeah. Yeah, that can be used against targets too. That's true. And that's a good warning, Ernie. Not only for, targeted individuals, but for everybody. It can be a way to manipulate and infiltrate the mind of people and get them into that salient landscape where you start worrying about what people think. Never get to that place. And I've talked about that before. You got to forgive yourself, even if you screw up. And also, you got to remember, I don't know if it's a good example or not. It's like when you break up with somebody or whatever, and you think the world is just over. But time goes on, and you move on. Okay. I'm not saying that, it's necessarily like that, but what I'm saying is that, we'll use another example since Ernie brought up the social media. What about somebody who gets thrown out there in the clickbait, right? Somebody screws up and everybody is talking about that person. Everybody in the whole world has got the spotlight on that poor individual and their screw up, man. And it's just, it's got to be overwhelming. It's one thing to screw up. It's one thing to have the people in your life giving you the stink eye. It's another thing for people all over the freaking world to be talking about you, man. But guess what? 2 weeks from then, it's going to get less. 2 months from then, they're going to be talking about somebody else. 2 years, and they're going to forget all about it. 2 decades, ancient history, man. Ancient history. And that's the way it is. And, like I said before, guys, eventually this is going to get taken care of. And, the whole crescendo and the emotional manipulation that is used against people, it's all about that buildup, right? Whether it's the invisible perps along with the tyrannical circumstances and, the people like Jason Black in the store, and you got all this weird stuff, and it's all coming, and you just think you're going to lose it. And it starts in the morning or the night before, and it keeps going, and you get to the end of the day, you're just ready to rip your hair out. Don't do it, man. Remember, all you got to do is cancel out the damn emotional manipulation. They want you to get that way. It's almost tempting to look at this place like a loosh farm sometimes, because that's what it is. They cannot do this to you if you do not get emotional. And like I said, 2 hours later, it's going to be different. 2 days later, it's going to be moving into the past. 2 weeks, 2 years, 2 decades, and it's gone. And they didn't get anything. They didn't get what they wanted, right? And that's what's important. Rise, welcome to the live stream. Yeah, you're going to have to listen to this one on the other side, but I'm glad to have you in here, brother, man. And Rise says, it's all about how you react. It is. It is. And it's also that perception that you have in your mind. And I've been dealing with that a lot lately because I get caught up in this whole thing, guys. I do. I don't have all the answers, man. I deal with this stuff every day. That's why I'm thinking about it. I've got to slap myself upside the face. It's like, man, you're giving into this. Dude, they got you going. And I'll be, getting emotional. I'll let it get to me. I'll start ruminating. I'll start getting depressed. I'll start getting worried. And I'll forget the power that I have. Right? It's like Rise is talking about. You don't have to react. And you have to remember the fickle nature, not only of the people you're dealing with, but of all the emotions and all this stuff, all these, things around you. It's like what Ernie said with social media. It's all thorns crackling in the fire. It's bright. It gives off an intense heat, but it's gone just as soon as it showed up, man. It's all just a bunch of cotton candy. It's all it is. And it comes down and it's gone. It's all fluffy and it's a big deal until it's just, there's nothing there. There's no substance. People are manipulated very easily. It's like I talked about at the beginning of the show. Consider how fickle and frail the people are that are around you and how feeble and pathetic your attackers really are. Look at the pusillanimous nature of the individuals that you're dealing with. Not only that, but the frailty of the people who are manipulated by them. It is literally nothing. It is so meaningless and insignificant. And but it seems like it's everything, right? It seems like it all matters, and this is all you get. You got one life, and we're going to take it all from you. And it's not like that. There's really nothing here anyway. It's all just there to manipulate you. Okay. Yeah, a lot of smoke and mirrors. Well, guys, I think I'm going to have to end the live stream now. And, it's good to be back and talking to you guys. And like I said, I'm not really going to go into the whole thing where, it's with YouTube. It started with that where I couldn't go live. And then, so finally we got this figured out. And it's going to be great hanging out with you guys. And hopefully it'll be productive. Like I always say, targets deal with a lot of deprivation. And it's important that we get together. It's important that we have this time to interact. And I know I don't get to all the comments and everything, and it's just, I try to keep this as productive and educational as possible. And I apologize if I didn't get to your comment, but what I do, I guess that kind of sounded weird. What I do put up on the high priority list is, you guys start putting comments in here and asking me to do videos, or you want to, give me a topic or whatever. And I like that because it gives me ideas. Sometimes I come on here and I don't even know what the hell I'm going to talk about, but I want to hang out with you. And I know that with Gangstalking, that there's a million things we could go into, and there's always something to say, whether it's the mind control, the demonic stuff, the technology, the secret societies, whatever, the psychological techniques, the gaslighting, the deprivation. There's always something to talk about, man. But I do like ideas, and if anybody has any prayer requests, because in fact, I think I'll have one right now for me. I've talked about before. I've had a lot of health problems, and lately I've been dealing with a lot of joint issues. So I'm going to ask for prayer for that, and I appreciate that. It works, lifting up your request in front of everybody that's going to listen to this, so they can pray for you. It's not that praying to God is not enough, but He asks us to pray for one another, and I think there's a reason. Not only so we can interact, but He hears those things, and it works. It does. Sometimes it doesn't work the way we want it to, or the way we think God should do it, but He has a way of doing things so that everything is a benefit for everyone. He's a multitasker, if you will. So go ahead and put those in the comments too. And I'd like to thank everybody for participating. I'd like to thank everybody for their prayers. And I also like to thank everybody for helping support me and the channel. The link is in the description. Guys, God bless. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.